So our next reader is Alex Cigale.
I'm going to go over here.
Alex is a poet, translator, and professor. He has just returned, and I mean just returned, like 1 week ago, I think, from a 2-year stint teaching at the American University of Central Asia in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. And hopefully Alex will read some of his own translation work, his own work, and I think some of his wife, Dana Golan's translation as well. Alex, go.
Thank you. I want to start with Daniel Harms, the Russian absurdist writer, who died, who feigned insanity and died of starvation in the hospital in 1942. So Daniel Harms. It's called "This Is How Hunger Begins," and it was in Panama. This is how hunger begins. You wake early and full of life, but soon begin to weaken. The onset of boredom arrives, the sense of loss impending, of quickening powers of mind, followed by a peace descending, and then the terrifying ending. Mandelstam, who might be a little bit more familiar to you, spent about 5-6 years in the camps in the 30s, and then died in 38 in transport to another camp. And this was a modern poetry and translation issue called Poetry and the State, which had some amazing and powerful stuff. I'll read 2 short ones. Osip Mandelstam. Along the row of human heads recede the hills. I shrink with them, will no longer be mentioned, but in sweet books and in children's games, I will rise up again to tell all the sun shines on. This is either the verge of insanity or your conscience compunction goaded, the knot of being where we're prisoners and are freed, unbound for day-to-day life. It's thus that good-hearted spider, the light, spreads upon the world's ribs the cathedral crystals of eternal life, and then again gathers them up into a single bunch. The graceful clumps of the pure lines gathered by the thin light will at a point in time converge and congregate like honored guests who've removed their hats. Only here on earth and not in heaven, as in a house that is brimming with song, we must take care not to wound or scare them, and all will be well if we might live that long. For what I've said to you, forgive me. Read it back to me, quietly. I want to read at least one of them. Andrei Vesnyansky, who passed away a couple of years ago. I guess I'll say just a word. The Yenisei River is like where sort of like the Central Asian civilization, the Turks came out of there, and the Native Americans came out of there. So he's just using it to contrast it with Moscow as a wild place. And does it have a title? Yeah, it's called On Rafts. The Yenisei River carries us like rafts on the endless black water. I belong to no one. I am not yours, not yours, not yours. I hate the hollow of your lips, your hair, dress, dwelling place. I had spit on your sacred and hypocritical name. I hate you for the lies of your postcards and telegrams. I hate like a knife that despises the living at night. I hate your silk, your cascading nylon of drapes. More than canvas for a painting, I need a sack. Ringleader, wallflower of Moscow's profane payphones. I am terrible, like the prophet Jonah, swollen and turned black from gnat bites. The blue cheek of the fisherman shining like the scales of a common carp. No to tears, yes to manly tanned like hide hands, yes to rowdy women washing like steeds, trucks, yes to the nozzles of the trucks that hose sadness off me. And he did a lot of poems that pay tribute to my pops, and I think that's one of my best tributes. I'll read one other Russian poet, a contemporary of mine. Maybe two, and then I'll read 2 or 3 short ones later. This I wanted to do because it's Dana's. Actually, this is not my translation. It's Dana Dolan's translation, and she's camera shy. But we'll get her out next. So this is by Dimias. It's another Siberian poet, and I mentioned this in the last reading. I read a couple simply because there's a lot of commonality with native traditions, our Native American traditions. It's called The Water Returns, and it's dedicated to my son Artemi. And he takes the house in the Poconos sometimes. So I don't know if this was in Siberia or the Poconos. I have a feeling it's both. The Water Returns. Oh, sorry. So it's The Water Returns by Dimias. It's translated by Dana Dolan, my son Artemi. The water returns. The pools teem with tiny fish. Barefoot and tired, my son and I start the long haul to the boat we left beach on the shoreline shoals. Water has reclaimed our islands and our ships. This change in my landscape, familiar, lived in, dense, is this what the ancestors sighed about in despair? The moon has been dying, the phases of lunar death draw out living springs from snakes' subterranean lairs. We didn't send prayers up with aromatic smoke to Manitou, didn't rely on his pagan craft. There is some other who heeded the truth and spoke. We asked for nothing, he pleaded on our behalf. The water has come back to our beloved lakes. You'll lead your fleet toward the sun today, my child. As at the snap of a whip, my soul startles and aches. The oars splitting water evoke flocks of geese in flight. Our camp is flooded, shivering ripples glide. The campfire smoking hisses on waterlogged land. A heavy knife is installed in a fish's eye, the knife my son used to pin the bream to the sand. I sense a skilled hunter, the firm unrelenting grasp of a world's rightful owner, a gamer's attentive mind, his hand unyielding like century-tempered grass. How endlessly long its field lingers preserved in mind. A cub who must mark and brand every choice part. He draws magic patterns on lake bottoms sandy, dim. He reads every fish like a letter and throws a dart to choose our fate from the blur of a passing dream. He knows, he remembers that once he was water too, omniscient moisture, the salt of the earth, its crust, the soul of creation, to which he is still attuned, part of the shoreline lost somewhere in cosmic dust. The water returns, the surly spirit grows strong. Fear thins out and retreats, having left no trace. Freedom, which seizes and carries two hearts along, is more important and graver than all troubles face. I said this earlier. We collaborate by choosing our own stuff and then editing, but and I have a feeling she chose to translate that one because of her son and was able to do it. So, actually one last, and then I'll read. These the rest are all short. I'm not sure how much time. I wanted to read one short one that I translated by Dimias, and I'll read 2-3 short ones now. So this is my translation. It's called "I Have Become Lost in the Lord's Heart." I have become lost in the Lord's heart. The bright light blinds my eyes. Like a blind man, I stretch out my hands, descending the icy stairs. The egg yolk and mustard, sticky like sacrificial blood, the bitter smoke of a shepherd's fire, my companions and guides. I am a pilgrim in your heart, not expecting to find a thing. In labyrinths, life is longer, so perhaps you will remember the rumbling of my boots. Then I will go out for a breath of fresh air and lean on the brick crenels and witness in the bitter frost naked sorcerers in fur mittens dancing around the campfire. Well, I'll do two. So this one, a couple of surrealist poems of my own sort of, I guess. One is an imitation of Apollinaire, and the other is an imitation of Neruda. These are what are called homophonic translations. I would just follow in their sound patterns of their poems. The first one is after Apollinaire's photography. Okay, it's called "Backhanded Compliment, My Flower." It's pretty good. The tonsils I am wearing tonight come pouring out of me atrociously, like flour out of a reticulated sea. You are photographing the brown mushroom balanced precariously on my forehead. So what if I look ridiculous? Who cares when the mushroom is as beautiful as the whitecaps beyond the parasols of the sea? Tonight's moon is as delicious as a Claire, and the loon dances in the Jordan, sweet as a fig. It is plain to see that the double lives of the gardeners are an enviable lot, and a photograph can only smoke out the ardor with which I'm struck by this beauty. The this and that of the world which photography reveals, the tone of language, the one and only intended, the one that you and I eloped to. Photography is twofold, like a man who, though soiled, is still in quest of beauty. I am mightily sore about this point, thrown practically into a coma. The poor wraith who materializes in a flower is an also wraith. Likewise, photography's delight is the champion's bronze. What I mean is that the most beautiful flower is a better articulated self than you or I are. In English, and this one was in a Richard Peabody's magazine called Gargoyle. It's called "The Rabid Loves of the Americans." The ants who live in Paducah gallop like Cossacks over the rural funeraries, those rivers of arteries, and the fires of the Cordilleras burn with crotch-rot, the condors of the new Parisians immobile. A few elements of humanity's exposure to hell's railroads, truant paths, pompous planetarians, tiaras, umbrage, few vesicles of disappearance, the delis and the bars tremulous as vague forms. Few Caribbean canticles like Pedro's molasses cup imperious preludes in the raucous silence, the blood-curdling turns of the natural habitats in a craggy arms of crystalline universe. The scriptured initials of the terrified statuary inscrutable, my dear Nadia's impudent prods, order the snarls of daring deputies who violate the olive invidious idioms without provocation. Few countenance the clavicles of the accordions who so inundate the silence with their singing that the perdition of videos of German pastorals arrangements of Perry Como's Salvation Rosary goad Niagara's tired arms into a bloated Caesura. You stand Yankee, paired with history's contraries. About that one, I was really impressed by Gargoyle's research department. I had an intern contact me and tell me that Perry Como does not have a Salvation Rosary. Was I making a mistake? I've had this experience two or three times where I wrote a poem about something in the news, and then the subject matter was taken for a film. I had that experience a couple of times. This one, I forget what the film is called. It's called the Todd's Crime Scene Removal and Cleaning Service. And it was in a magazine called Global City Review in City College. Todd's Crime Scene Removal and Cleaning Service. The housekeeping habits of the deceased, the treadmill in the living room, the vase of roses on the table, the joyful clutter of children's toys scattered round the attic, axes, machetes, nail guns, and chainsaws. What mysteries lurk in the dank basement to keep imagination's pace with reality? As tears start streaming uncontrollably, that's when my discreet services come in. Winters, as violence moves indoors, the families and friends of the deceased, stuck more than ever with the unpleasant consequences of foul play and suicide, leave the painful and dirty work to me. The crime scene appears still, as though composed for the purpose the aftermaths photograph, not the surface of things seen, but what goes on underneath our personal war with grief. Business being what it is, brisk, forgive, gallows humor, the sense of the macabre. There's worse relief than in brusque sarcasm if your choice is between serious and blotto. Trust me with your keys. Count on my motto. I will never leave anyone hanging.